Fala pessoal, boa noite, tudo bem com vocês aí? Bem-vindos a mais um webinar da CI. Hoje a gente tem um papo super legal para a gente conversar aqui com vocês. Estamos aqui para falar sobre imigração para o Canadá. Que o Canadá é um dos países mais queridos pelos nossos hashtag viajantes CI, a gente não tem dúvida nenhuma disso. O que você não sabe, o que você precisa saber é que o Canadá está de portas abertas para receber você que quer ir morar, quer ser um residente permanente no Canadá. E é por isso que hoje nós estamos aqui com a CI do Canadá, o Ian, que vai chegar aqui comigo daqui a pouquinho, e também o nosso super parceiro da Incubate Bessel, que vem vindo também para esse webinar, que vai contar tudo para a gente. Esse webinar, ele é um verdadeiro teste para você que quer fazer esse encontro aí, essa imigração, essa residência no Canadá. Sabe por quê? Esse nosso webinar de hoje, ele é totalmente em inglês. A gente vai bater um papo aqui em inglês, a gente vai conversar em inglês, mas o Ian vai estar aqui, ele é um brasileiro que mora no Canadá, já tem muito tempo, ele que cuida da CI no Canadá, ele reside em Toronto, ele tem a residência permanente dele lá e ele vai contar para a gente, junto com a equipe da Incubate, tudo que você precisa saber para você ser um residente aí no Canadá. Enquanto isso, se ficar qualquer dúvida, o nosso time CI Responde está aqui, a equipe dos consultores da CI está aqui para te ajudar também. Então, tudo que você tiver de dúvidas, vai escrevendo aí no chat, o Ian vai estar lendo o chat com a gente, eu vou estar aqui lendo esse chat com vocês e também a nossa equipe respondendo para vocês aqui tudo que vocês tiverem de dúvidas sobre imigração no Canadá. Ian, tudo bem com você? Boa noite, como é que você está?
Tudo bem, Willy?
Tudo jóia, tudo legal, obrigado pela presença.
Que é isso, o prazer é meu. Legal a gente estar nesse evento aqui, né, Willy? É um assunto super demandado, né? Que a gente tem, os nossos clientes o tempo todo, tanto aí no Brasil como aqui no Canadá, sempre nos questionando a respeito da imigração, né?
É verdade. Oi, Ian, o que a gente vai falar hoje nesse nosso encontro aqui? O que vocês separaram aí de informações e tudo que a gente precisa saber? Eu sei que a gente vai ter aí 1 milhão de informações, de detalhes, de tudo que a gente precisa saber quando o assunto é a residência no Canadá, quando o assunto é essa imigração. E a Incubate, que é a principal empresa hoje no mundo para levar pessoas, inclusive brasileiros, para o Canadá, essa super parceira da CI, está aqui com a gente, um encontro aí histórico, inesquecível, e para todo mundo que está pensando em fazer essa imigração, esse é o momento da gente aprender e entender tudo. O que a gente vai conversar aqui hoje, Ian?
Legal, Willy. O assunto é muito grande, é muito vasto. Obviamente, não daria para que nós fizéssemos só um webinar cobrindo todo esse assunto, né? Como a gente já tem falado antes, quer dizer, o Canadá ele tem mais de 60 programas de imigrações, né? Para imigração, tanto federal, provincial, regional. Então, a ideia a gente separou aqui com o time da Incubate, especificamente o Bassel, para falar exatamente sobre os principais aspectos, ou seja, dar uma visão geral de como o sistema funciona, né? Como é que ele opera, quais são os fatores críticos aí para você se tornar um residente permanente e tudo mais. E também ele selecionou alguns caminhos típicos que você pode ter para você transitar ou se planejar ou se preparar até para você ter o seu score necessário. Como vocês sabem, né, o sistema é baseado em pontuação, então você se qualificar é basicamente o essencial para isso, né?
Legal, boa, muito interessante. Ian, então eu vou estar por aqui, eu vou fechar minha câmera, vou fechar meu microfone, mas vou estar aqui acompanhando, vou estar de olho no chat também. Se tiver alguma pergunta, algo que eu acho que é importante, aí eu te parar o Bessel também, para que a gente aproveite desse momento e responda aqui para o pessoal. Eu faço isso, eu vou aparecendo por aqui de vez em quando, e você também fica à vontade aí para trazer todas as informações, todos os detalhes que a gente precisa sobre esse assunto. Certo?
Certíssimo, Willy.
Então tá combinado. E para você que está acompanhando a gente, muito obrigado, fica aí com a gente. Esse assunto vai dar o que falar, porque se tem uma coisa que o brasileiro quer fazer é ir embora para o Canadá, né, Ian?
Sem dúvida, sem dúvida. Obrigado, Willy. Bom, pessoal, só para vocês, então, para a gente organizar aqui direitinho, para que vocês aproveitem ao máximo aí o webinar, Como o William mencionou, o Bassel vai falar em inglês, então já é um teste, já é uma forma de vocês testarem o inglês de vocês. Eu vou estar aqui também, quer dizer, qualquer pergunta que vocês quiserem fazer e não se sentirem confortáveis em fazer em inglês, não tem problema, eu traduzo para ele para que a pergunta seja feita. Tá? Como a gente falou, é um assunto bastante amplo, um assunto bastante rico. Vamos tentar procurar responder as perguntas mais para o final, porque daí a gente faz perguntas e respostas mais focados nisso, e daí a gente consegue a continuidade. Se eventualmente alguma outra pergunta for mais contextualizada, a gente pode trazer eles durante o próprio evento, mas fazendo no final, a gente vai fazer isso mais rico e a gente pode explorar assuntos distintos de parte a parte. Mesmo assim, se vocês quiserem fazer perguntas pelo chat, fiquem à vontade para fazer a qualquer momento, seja em português, seja em inglês, como vocês se sentirem confortáveis. Tá? Basil, are you ready?
I was waiting for my cue.
Absolutely, I will call always in English. So introduce yourself just briefly, if you want to go ahead and tell about yourself and Incubate as well. Sure. Please be free to do that. And if you want to also, after that, share your screen or your content, it could be great.
Perfect. All right. Well, of course, Jan, thank you for the introduction. You really made me look bad now with your perfect Portuguese, and I'm speaking English now, so you're making me feel jealous. But anyway, my name is Basil. I'm the principal consultant here at Incubate. We've been, we're working with CI for many, many years. And what we wanted to do today is to open everybody's eyes to the idea of immigration, because there's so many opportunities that not everybody knows about. And that's the purpose of what we're going to be covering today is, where are you today? What can you do, regardless of what your objectives are? Temporarily, coming to Canada, exploring, wanting to make Canada your new home, or you're not even sure about it. And that's pretty much what we wanted to do, because there's so much to cover when it comes to immigration. And today is going to be an information overload. So those of you who want to load up on their coffee and their tea and all that, my advice is just to do that from now. So Jan, do you want to kick off and for me to share the presentation?
Aren't you allowed to share it? So
no, I'm going to go ahead and do so right now, and just let me know if we're good to go.
Yeah, you're ready. Your presentation is on, so.
All right, sounds good. So the focus for today is going to be Canada, and then we're going to be able to go through different things. Like I said, my name is Basil. One of the things that you always need to remember that whenever it comes to visas and immigration, all that, you need to work with somebody who's licensed in Canada to give you this type of advice, or even to process your application. So for us, for Incubate and working with CI, we do have licenses all over Canada that allow us to practice on a federal level, so in Quebec and also outside of Quebec. So this is something exciting for us. Some of our branches have been out there for 7 years, some are newer. So we've got offices in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, which is exciting for our clients. This way, no matter where you're going to end up going in Canada, you'll have somebody to support you locally in one of our branches. I'm not going to get too much into the marketing aspect of things. All I can tell you is we've been doing this for a while. We've processed thousands of applications and various types. We've been working with Brazil or Brazilians for a very long time in Brazil and also inside Canada. So it's been exciting for us to help more people. I just mentioned this just so that you know the information you're going to be giving today is not just theory. It's coming from practice, from us seeing a lot of different requirements or different type of applications and what kind of requirements some of you might have. What's also nice is that our team is pretty diverse, but if you notice that it's Brazilian, and then obviously a lot of other nationalities as well. But what's really cool about our team is that some of them actually went through the same journey that you're about to do, regardless if they came here as visitors, not even sure if they're going to stay in Canada or not, or they came to study or to work. So whenever we work with our clients, and this is why we've been doing this with CI for a long time, we speak to our clients from experience, our own experiences, which is really nice for you because you're going to get somebody who really understands the kind of worries and the questions you might hold. Now, before we kick off, remember, by the end of today's conversation, you're going to have to make two decisions. A decision based on something called TRS, or temporary resident status, and another decision about something called PRS, or permanent resident status. So these two go hand in hand. Some of you might say, I want to come to Canada first as a student, as a visitor, as a worker, something that's temporary, and then I can convert it into immigration status. And some of you might say, listen, I actually want to come as an immigrant right away. I just want to get my permanent residency. I qualify for one of the immigration programs, and I'm going to start my journey for immigration from Brazil. So either or, it doesn't really matter, but just remember, you might have to come first temporarily and extend to a permanent stay, or you can go in for your permanent stay since the get-go, and then you obviously can stop whatever you want. You can stop at permanent residency, or you can actually go all the way to citizenship and obtain your Canadian passport. So before we talk about the details of immigration, let's just talk about what's happening right now in Canada when it comes to COVID, when it comes to the travel restrictions that are happening around the globe. It's not just Canada. What's really nice is Canada has been one of the leading countries in controlling the disease. The borders are starting to open up. The restrictions are being eased. So let's talk about the three main categories that are out there right now. So when it comes to visitors, the current travel exemptions have been granted for those who have immediate family members in Canada. And on October 2nd, they announced that now extended families included as well. So if you have any brothers and sisters, or if you have a partner, a common law partner, a spouse, parents, now you'll be able to travel to Canada, of course, if you can confirm your quarantine plan for the 2 weeks, and you're going to be staying more than 15 days. When it comes to students, the travel exemption for students kicks in on October 22nd, so that's very exciting for us. This is when international students are going to be exempted from the travel ban, and they'll be able to enter Canada again by following the 2-week mandatory quarantine plan, and then just going through the same regulations that the school that you're going to be attending will impose when it comes to their readiness plan for COVID. And of course, workers are also exempted from the travel ban. They have been for a long time now. This is not something recent, but only if the person holds a job offer in Canada, or this person has already been living in Canada and then traveled and they're returning back. So if you only just have a work permit, like say working holiday visa or whatnot, and you haven't received your offer of employment, then you're technically not exempted yet. And again, the 2-week mandatory quarantine applies as well. Citizens, Canadian citizens and permanent residents, obviously they're welcome now to travel in and out of Canada. So if you notice here that the travel restrictions are being eased, international students, it's a big category, it's a big group of foreign nationals coming to Canada. And by opening the borders to them, that means slowly the other categories will follow. And hopefully in the next few weeks, things are going to look more promising to all of us. Now, let's get into the grub of things. How do I become a Canadian permanent resident? Am I qualified? Am I not going to be able to come? Can I study? Can I work? How do I do this? Let's agree on one thing. There is no one magic formula that, me and Jan from CI are going to come in and say, here you go. This is the formula that fits all. Each one of you today is going to have to make your own decision about what methodology, what pathway do I want to use to immigrate to Canada. Some of you are going to say, listen, I want to integrate in the country first. I want to come visit. I want to become a student. I want to become a worker. I want to get Canadian experience and use that to immigrate. Others to say, no, I'm a skilled professional. I already have my language. I've already got my education, my work experience. I actually qualify to apply for immigration right away. So I'm going to apply for my permanent residency without coming on temporary status. Others, they're going to say, listen, I've been self-employed, or I've held senior positions. I'm in my 50s or my late 40s. I don't want to come and work. I actually want to come and open a small business, and then through my business, I would like to receive my permanent residency. I want to become a investor. I want to become a business immigrant. Others, they say, okay, well, I have my partner, I have my spouse, I have my husband, my wife, my common law partner, and who's Canadian or a permanent resident, and I'm going to go through spousal sponsorship. I'm going to be sponsored by that person. Of course, there's also a family. So mom and dad or children who wants to sponsor one another up and down, and then going through the parents and grandparents sponsorship program as well, which just opened up and it's been announced that is going to start accepting applications as of October 13th, which is very exciting for us. Of course, those who have hardship, those who are fearing prosecution in their home country and they want to come to Canada as refugees or asylum seekers, there are certain regulations about that that you need to maintain in order for you to become eligible. So here, this is the pathway that you're going to have to pick for yourself, whether it is one of them or all of them or multiple steps, it doesn't really matter. But the most common way of immigration is coming in as a skilled professional, using your skill sets in order for you to integrate in Canada and get your permanent residency. So let's cover that first, just because that's the majority or the biggest group or category of individuals who come to Canada. The way you want to think about yourself as a skilled professional, again, from the eyes of the government of, the Ministry of Immigration in Canada, which is the following. I am going to use either my English language proficiency or French, one of them, not both, and I'm going to use that to apply for immigration. If I don't have advanced language proficiency in both languages, I'll say, okay, in either one of the two languages, I'm going to use both languages at an intermediate level, and I'm going to use that for immigration. Or you're going to say, listen, I'm going to study in Canada, and I'm going to use my Canadian education to apply for immigration. Or I'm going to work in Canada, and through my Canadian experience, I'm going to be able to apply. Or, listen, I am very proficient. I have a company in Canada who would like to employ me. They gave me a job offer, and through this job offer, I'm going to be able to become eligible. Or I'm going to go to a small area in Canada, a small province, a small state that doesn't have too many immigrants. And there are special privileges for immigrants who want to go in these areas because they're trying to increase the population. So you don't have to do all these. You can take one or two of them in order for you to become eligible for immigration. Now, really quick, just for you to understand how immigration works, how the government is going to be processing your application. There is a federal government, one rule, one law, one regulation that applies all over Canada, minus Quebec. Most of you know it as express entry, and we'll be able to cover that. It's a points-based system that you will be able to go through. The equivalent of that in Quebec is a system called ARIMA, mainly based on French language proficiency, and is for immigration applications in Quebec. So federal government all over Canada minus Quebec is express entry, and then in Quebec it's called ARIMA. And then throughout the 10 provinces and 3 territories in Canada, there's something called PNP, or the Provincial Nominee Program. This is a special program that each province will have to nominate or to attract certain individuals that they want to stay there. So for example, Alberta can say, listen, I want nurses to come here. Ontario can say, hey, I want people who speak French to come here. Every province can select their own candidates and nominate them on their own. So this is the different, I would call it the opponent, the person who you're going to have to impress in order for them to accept your immigration applications. Now, let's talk about the theory behind immigration, because everything in 2015 changed. Immigration as we knew it for over 30 years in Canada is no longer what it is now. So it's important for you to know what things used to look like, how things are now, in order for you to prepare yourself going forward. So before 2015, Canada used to look exactly how like this picture is, a very long queue of people, and every person that applies goes all the way to the back of the line. And you would wait many, many years until your application gets processed. So it used to be a paper-based process. It used to be based on very minimum points you needed to achieve. But the problem is you would wait and you go back to the end of the line. 2015, the government said, I don't want this line anymore. Everybody sit down. And now we're going to select people who we want to come to Canada. This process changed the procedures of immigration entirely, because now it's no longer about you standing in line. Now you have to be invited to apply. You're going to hear this term many times, ITA, invitation to apply. Sure, they tell you that we are going to process applications in 6 months or less. That's very true. But when does the clock start ticking? The clock starts ticking whenever you get invited by the Canadian government. So how do you get invited? How do you become, in the eyes of the Canadian government, as a professional who is going to come and benefit the country by working hard and then paying taxes? There's many factors, many things that you can do in order for you to achieve points and qualify for immigration. But let's talk about the 4 most important factors that the government really cares about. There's your language proficiency in English and French. I wish you can get more points for Portuguese, but hey, there's the 2 primary languages in Canada, English and French. And there are different language exams you can take. IELTS, CELPIP for English, or TEF or TCF for French. And then there's your education, right? The education you've done outside or inside Canada. The government is going to take that into consideration. Your work experience, inside or outside of Canada, again, as long as it's a professional occupation. And then your age. Now, what's really cool is your education, you can always improve it. Your language, you can always improve it. Work, you can always improve it. Age is the only thing that works against you. The older you get, the more points you lose, or the less points you gather, because you are not going to achieve as much points as you would when somebody who's younger than you is in the system. So for example, for me, good luck to me if I want to apply for immigration right now. So for this to make sense to you, let me just give you an example. So let's assume you don't speak any French. You have just intermediate level of English. You have a bachelor's degree, so university degree, no post-graduation, no master's, no higher education. You've got 3 years of work experience, and let's say you're 29 years old. This kind of profile will put you in the score range in Express Entry of around 290 to 350 points. So from the get-go, you're going to be like, well, 350 points. All right, this is good, right? Who do you compare yourself to? There is no highest and minimum score. There's you against everybody else in the system. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So right now, everybody's competing against 470 points. So the government said, I opened the door for people to come in, to show their interest to apply, to say they want to come to Canada and immigrate. And then the lowest candidate is right now holding around 470 points based on the amount of nominations being sent. So if you're in the system at 350 points, and you look at the government is selecting 470, well, how do I go from this score to that score? Well, let's talk about one strategy. So before we talk about the strategy, we need to understand what 470 points mean. 470 equals the following. Somebody who speaks English or French at an advanced level, somebody who has higher education, so master's or post-graduation plus a degree, somebody who has 3 years of experience, and somebody who is under the age of 30, so up to 29. If you have these 4 credentials, you're sitting at 470 points. Now, let's assume you don't have advanced English or French, you have intermediate level. Or if you don't have master's degree, you have bachelor's, or if you have just 2 years of experience, or let's say you're 35 years old. If one of these categories or one of these factors falls under, that means you're not going to be able to qualify for 470. You'll go into the system with lower points. It doesn't mean you're a bad candidate. It just means there are people who have more points than you in the system. Now, here's a tip for you. Before you start thinking about, okay, I have a bachelor's, I'm just going to go and study my master's, or I'm going to do my MBA. I want you to think about the following, and this is what we put it in a box. If you currently have a university degree, a bachelor's degree, the effect of you taking a master's degree or doing a one-year diploma, so for example, a post-graduation or a post-grad diploma, a combination of a bachelor's plus a one-year diploma is almost the same effect as a master's. So you could potentially do your master's, or you could potentially do a one-year postgraduate diploma as long as you have a bachelor's, and these two will give you to the 470 points you need, assuming the other factors are there as well. So where does that number 470 come from? Usually before COVID, every 2 weeks, the government will do something called a draw, a selection. They invite people. They say 3,400 people, come and apply. 4,000 people, come and apply. Every 2 weeks, this process repeats. And then lately it's been, well, I mean, it slowed down a little bit, but if you look at this table, this is what's been happening in 2020 in its entirely since January till today. If you notice that the lowest selection point that happened this year was 470, which was in February. And then after that, it's been an average. It goes up between 470 to 475. So this is the golden number. This is what you want to be, is between 470 to 475. This is your safe zone. What's interesting is there is something called CEC, or the Canadian Experience Class. So if your experience is outside Canada, you're going to go under something called FSW, or the Federal Skilled Worker Program. Inside Canada experience is called CEC. Look at the scores. If you have Canadian experience, not only are you going to get more points from your Canadian experience, but also the points, the selection points are lower. It's in the range of around 440 to 445 points. So this is something you can definitely benefit from as well. So let's say we go back to the example that we talked about, which is I'm in the system with 350 points and the government was 470 points. How can I go from 350 to 470 or 480 or 500? Here's the first thing you can do. Improve your language proficiency. In English or in French, it doesn't matter. For this to make sense to you, those who are familiar with the IELTS test, there's the general training test version of IELTS. If you do 7 in reading, 7 in writing, 7 in speaking, and 8 in listening, these 4 brackets equal something called CLB level 9, or Canadian Language Benchmark level 9. This is the government's definition of advanced English. And check this out. If you have three years of experience in Brazil and you have advanced English, government is going to give you 50 extra bonus points. And if you have a master's degree, or if you have a bachelor's and you're going to do the one-year diploma together, and you have advanced English, the government will give you an extra 50 points. So simply having 3 years of experience in Brazil and having a bachelor's degree and a one-year diploma, if you work on your English and your French, you go from 350 to 450, no questions asked. This degree, the one-year diploma or the master's, it could be done anywhere, of course, right? It could be done in Canada, or it could be done even in Brazil, or could be even done online. From now, you start taking classes even through a Canadian college or university, and then you'll get the exact same amount of points, assuming your English is good to go or your French. So this is one way to get yourself to the other side of the fence. It's important for you to also understand what work experience means. So in Brazil, when you say I work, well, not every job or every occupation qualifies for immigration. There are certain levels, right? There are 5 different levels when it comes to job titles in Canada: 0, A, B, C, and D. They call it NOC, National Occupation Classification. Professional jobs, office jobs are 0, A, and B. If it's within these 3 levels and you work continuously for 12 months for a minimum of 30 hours per week, obviously in a paid position, that is considered qualified work experience. Yeah. So if you work less than 12 months, it wouldn't count. If you work part-time and you have 2 jobs working part-time in the same position, 2 different companies, that's also okay. And then you'll be able to combine your different experiences in order to qualify for 1, 2, 3, 6 years of experience. But obviously the most amount of points that you will get is 3 years. More than that, you really wouldn't benefit much from it. So another point you also need to keep in mind is you have to have some savings whenever you want to immigrate to Canada, right? The savings, it's not money you're going to spend, right? It's just money that you need to show the Canadian government that I have this money just in case I need to use it. And it depends on your family size. So if it's just you, it's around $12,960. If you have a spouse, you add a little bit more depending on your family size. The savings will vary. This is only if you're going to be applying for immigration from Brazil. Now, if you come to Canada and you're a student or you're a worker and you're already here and you're going to apply from Canada to immigration through Canadian Experience Class or CEC, you do not have to show any of these savings, right? So this is going to apply to you only if you're going to apply for immigration from outside. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to drink some water. And Jan, if you just want to see if anybody has anything in terms of feedback, or should we continue?
Of course. Pessoal, só para fazer um pequeno break aqui para o Bassel tomar uma água, só lembrando para vocês que, como a gente falou logo no começo, é um assunto bastante cheio, bastante denso, né? Eu já passei para vocês aí, para vocês já fazerem as perguntas já no chat do YouTube, porque nós vamos apresentá-las, vamos fazer essas perguntas para o Bassel no final, que a gente acha que é melhor, porque daí as perguntas vão gerar perguntas, e aí pode ser qualquer tema mencionado, tá? E não hesitem, fiquem à vontade para fazer perguntas, que a gente vai responder. Essa é uma parte importante da apresentação. Como a gente falou, não vai ser uma apresentação que cobre todos os tópicos, tá bom? Então fique à vontade, use o seu chat, e logo mais nós vamos fazer essas perguntas que já vi que já tem algumas ali, tá bom? Bassel, you may go on, please.
All right. So how can you come to Canada and work? How can you get a work permit? How can you get a job in Canada? There are different kind of work permits you can get here. Some of the work permits are based on your education in Canada. For an example, the most common, you'll hear this term all the time, something called PGWP. So PGWP stands for Post-Graduation Work Permit, or After Graduation Work Permit. If you attend certain colleges in Canada, they're obviously certified by the government to offer this kind of work permit. You can come to Canada as a student, let's say. You can work and study, and then after you graduate, you'll be able to work full-time using something called PGWP. If you are married, or if you have a spouse, and the spouse is accompanying you while you're studying, you work, and later on get your PGWP, your spouse is going to be able to get something called OWP, or Open Work Permit. So imagine you come to Canada and go to college for 1 year, or university or whatever, and then you'll be able to work part-time and study, and then your spouse is going to be able to work full-time. You graduate, you continue working full-time with your work permit, and then your spouse will continue working as well. So imagine this, you go to a 2-year public college in Canada, or you do your master's in Canada, it doesn't matter what province, this is federal law. So that's 2 years, and after you graduate, you get a work permit for 3 years. Your spouse will get a work permit for 2 years and 3 years. So that's a 5-year plan. Granted, you don't need all the 5 years, right? After obtaining 1 year of Canadian experience, you should be good to go for immigration, but that's just a privilege that the Canadian government gives to students who come to Canada. If you don't want to come and study, right, there's something called LMIA, or Labor Market Impact Assessment. For you to be able to obtain a job, a work permit in Canada, you need to have a job offer from a company. This job offer needs to be supported by an LMIA, and I'll talk to you about it in a minute. You just need to be sponsored by a company in order for you to work in Canada using this work permit. And there's another category called LMIA exemption codes. So there are certain things that will require you to get an LMIA to be sponsored by a company. And then there's a certain exemption code that says, you know what? You don't need to get an LMIA, you can get a work permit. And then we'll be able to cover that in a minute as well. One of those is something called IEC, or the International Experience Class. Think about it this way. Based on your nationality, based on the passport you hold and your age, you can potentially get a work permit. There is something some of you might have heard of, it's something called working holiday visa. There's something called young professionals visa, and there is something called recognized organization support for young professionals and working holiday visa holders. So this is just a very simple qualification based on, hey, are you from Brazil? Are you under the age of 36? Well, you know what? First come, first serve. The first 1,500, whatever, every year they open up a quota, and then you'll be able to come to Canada and work based on your nationality and your age. So this is an exciting way for you to think about potentially coming to Canada, and you can use this part of your plan. But if you don't want to go through the exemptions, if you want to go through the normal sponsorship procedure, which is LMIA, I want you to think about it this way. There are millions of people who are in Canada, Canadian permanent residents and citizens. Let's say Jan wants to hire you. He wants to hire you in CI Canada in Toronto. And he says, hey, listen, come, I would like you to work for me. And here's your job offer. Jan has to go to the Canadian government and say, I have this amazing Brazilian who would like to come to Canada and work here. The government is going to say, okay, hold on. You need to prove to me, the government, that this person is more qualified than Canadians, but there's labor shortage. Nobody can do this job in Canada. That's why you want to get somebody from Brazil to do. And then Jan, as an employer, would have to go through a normal procedure here in order for him to be able to say, yep, I proved to the government that there is a labor shortage, and I can go ahead and bring in somebody and sponsor them to take this job in Canada. That's what LMIA is in a nutshell, without confusing you with the details, which we can obviously discuss at a later point. Now, what does it mean to work in Canada from an immigration perspective? So great, I came to Canada, I studied, I worked, whatever. What does that mean to me? Remember the 470 points. How am I going to get to those? Well, if you work in Canada for 1 or 2 years, you can potentially get 40 to 60 extra bonus points. If you come to Canada and you study, your Canadian education can give you 15 to 30 points. If you get a job offer, you get an LMIA, you can get 50 points up to 200. And the PMP, the Provincial Nominee Program that we talked about, it gives you 600 bonus points. And no, this is not a typo. 600 points is not because you need 600 points. Let's say you have 350 points, you just need 200 and you're good to go. So why is the government giving you 600? 600 is literally the government said, you're going to get an ITA. You need to come to Canada. We're going to make sure that you get invited, right? And that's what happens. You start in the system with 350, 400 points. You impress one of the provinces. The province says, I will nominate you. So they give you these 600 points. Overnight, you go to 900, 1,000. Within 2 weeks, you get an invitation to apply and continue the PR procedure. And I'll give you a couple of examples for PMP. There's more than 60 different PMP programs, provincial nominee programs. Every province, they have their own system. Cool. Now, let's talk about something that is attainable, and you can potentially do it right now while you're in Brazil without even stepping a foot in Canada, which is using your English and your French in order for you to immigrate to Canada. So imagine you start taking online courses from one of the language schools in Canada, and you improve your English and French to a certain point, and then you use your language and only your language to immigrate to Canada, of course, with your experience and everything else back home. If you do come to Canada, you study and you take these languages, that's also great. But I want you to think about it this way. Don't feel stuck. Oh no, COVID, I can't come for the next 6 months. Am I going to go to sleep for 6 months and I can't do anything? My plan starts next year? No. You can start your plan from now online. to get yourself ready, obviously, if you need it. And then you can continue your journey when you'll be able to come to Canada, when your visa is approved and you can come. Or of course, you can come to Canada and start after you arrive. Again, it's not a problem. So check this out. If you speak intermediate English and upper intermediate French, the government will give you in the express entry system 30 bonus points. Now, what's really cool about this is you speak Portuguese, same Latin characters as French. It's actually easier for you to learn French than other languages. So if you take 6 to 9 months of French courses and you bring your level to something called B2 or upper intermediate French, and you have intermediate level of English, a combination of these two, you get 30 bonus points. Now, let me explain to you what 30 bonus points means. 30 bonus points is the same level as you coming to Canada to study a master's for 2 years. Here you get 30 points. And if you have intermediate English and French, you get 30 points. The government is clearly telling you that language is very important in Canada because it ensures that you'll be able to be successful in this country because you'll be able to get good jobs and good salary. That's why they give you 30 bonus points for French. Now, also, if you speak the same level, upper intermediate French, or they call it B2, and let's say you come to Canada to visit, or you come to Canada to study, or you come to Canada temporarily, and you find somebody, find Jan, and Jan's like, I really want to hire you. I'm going to give you a job offer, but I'm sorry, I can't sponsor you. I cannot give you LMIA. So you're going to tell Jan, actually, I don't need you to sponsor me because I speak French. And if you have B2 in French, upper intermediate French, and you have a job offer in Canada, no employer sponsorship, you fall under something called LMIA exemption code C16. You'll be able to get a work permit for 2 years. If you have a spouse, your spouse will get an open work permit for 2 years, and you can continue renewing these programs, these work permits, as long as obviously you speak French and you provide the language exam and you have a job offer in Canada. So this is a really nice way for you to think about using your English and French to get the bonus points for immigration, or being able to get your French in order for you to bypass the employer sponsorship nightmare that you have to deal with, and then chances of employment will be much higher under exemption code C16. What's also really cool about this is not immigration. Remember, we said something called temporary resident status, meaning the application process for this work permit is going to be much quicker than the time that you're going to be spending to get your immigration procedures approved. So what if you want to use your French not to work in Canada, to actually immigrate to Canada, and the 30 bonus points is not enough for you? Well, here's an example. And by the way, so far, when we say express entry, we're not talking about Quebec, and we're not even talking about Montreal. We're talking about Toronto. We're talking about Vancouver. We're talking about Alberta. We're talking about all of Canada outside of Quebec. So when I say French, again, outside of Quebec. And here's another example for you. There's a program called the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program for French-speaking skilled workers. Very fancy long term for something very simple. The province of Ontario is saying, I want you to come to Canada, and I want you to come to Ontario if you speak English and French under the Francophone Mobility Program. I want people who are bilingual to come to my province, and I'm going to support them to do so. How? This is interesting. No Canadian education required, no Canadian work experience required, no Canadian job offer required, and you will get the 600 points that we talked about for PMP. So you're going to tell me, well, this is interesting. Where's the catch? There's no such thing in life as a freebie, right? Well, there is a catch, and that's the catch. You need to have a bachelor's degree. Doesn't matter from where, Brazil. You have to have 1 year of experience. You have intermediate English, B1 English, intermediate French, which is upper intermediate French, which is B2 in French. And obviously, you need to be invited by the province to apply for this program. So if you look at the English and the French language exams, it's only like IELTS 5 to 5.5. And TEF or TCF, it's upper intermediate if you're not familiar with these scores. That's interesting. But of course, COVID happened. So here's what's going on. For the past 5 years, right, the program never had any minimum score. So literally, if you speak intermediate English, upper intermediate French, you have a bachelor's degree and 1 year of experience, doesn't matter what your score in the system, you're going to receive an invitation to apply from Ontario, and you'll be able to proceed with the system. But in January, you'll notice that things started changing. They implemented a minimum score. The minimum score, similar to express entry, changes every draw that they have based on the number of invitations that they issue. But what's interesting is that the range is around 424 to 433, which is around 50 points, 40 to 50 points under the express entry system with 470. So let's say you have perfect English, you have 3 PhDs, you have 90,000 years of experience, but you're in your 40s and you lost a lot of points under the age factor. No matter what you do, you cannot immigrate to Canada unless you come and study or you work. You can also consider French, and you can consider this program. So what happens is you lose 50 points under the age factor. Your total score is 430. The federal government will not select you, but the province of Ontario will, because their scoring system is around 40 to 50 points under. But again, remember, you must have the minimum required level of English and French in order for you to qualify for this program. Cool? So time-wise, I just want you to think about how you're going to plan things. I'm going to go through the express entry system and apply for my permanent residency. And others are going to say, I'm going to go through the express entry system, go through this province program, and then continue with my PR. Your total time frame is looking around 1.5 to 2 years, just because of the current situation with COVID. Now, do you wait in Brazil for 2 years? No, this is immigration. You can start your immigration procedures, and at the same time, like I said before, you can come to Canada temporarily, visitor, student, or worker. This is not either or. You can do both at the same time. You can get your study permit, your work permit, visit visa in a few weeks, come to Canada, start your journey, and at the same time, your immigration procedures are taking place, which potentially will take you anywhere from 1.5 to 2 years to complete. Jan knows me very well. We're very conservative people when it comes to setting up plans. So we always like to have a backup plan for the backup plan for the backup plan. So what if you say, I'm going to come to Canada with my advanced English and my master's, forget the whole French part. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go after my 470 points and get my PR, right? That's my plan A. What if something wrong happens in this plan? Then you can go to plan B, which is, you know what? I'm just going to take 6 months. I'm going to talk to CI. I'm going to get a 6 months course in French. I'm going to bring it to an upper intermediate level. I'll get my 30 bonus points and I will file for my permanent residency in Canada and I'm good to go. Others are going to say, oops, you know what? The government scoring change is too much. I don't know what to do. I'm running out of time. I'm just going to use my B2 in French, get my LMIA exemption or get my work permit without sponsorship. And then I'm going to use my Canadian experience to apply for permanent residency. And of course, for those who want to go through the provincial program in Ontario, they don't want to go to Vancouver. They're happy to come to Toronto. You'll make me and Jan very happy because we're here. And then you'll go through the 600 points for PMP. You're good to go. That's not it. I'm just giving you this as an example. There's 1,000 different combinations you can go through. This is just a presentation of one way to think of things. Okay. Jan, should I take a little break or continue?
I think you can continue, Basil. I think it's better to go one shot.
Okay.
You have your water, of course.
All right, I got my water. I'm good to go. So those of you who really like Montreal, I really like Montreal. We have an office there, beautiful place. Winter is a bit cold, but hey, listen, the summer makes it up. So what if you want to go to Quebec? What if you want to go to Montreal? What is the immigration system there? Remember, we said express entry is for federal government. ARIMA is the system that the Quebec government uses for immigration. I don't want to say it's copy paste from Express Entry. It uses the same methodology. Points, rounds of invitations, invitations to apply. So the ARIMA system is based in Quebec, meaning the primary language is it has to be French. And so you can't do advanced English in Quebec. It has to be advanced French. So if this is what you want to do, the exact same thing we talked about, do it, except make sure that your primary language is French, not English, and you're going to go to C1 or C2 in French in order for you to be successful in the ARIMA system. Other than ARIMA, well, and this is just as a presentation slide of, you know, the monthly draws that are happening. Again, you're going to notice not too many people are being invited because of COVID, but there was a draw just yesterday, and then the number jumped back up to what it was in December of 19. It was in the 200 range, which is amazing. So now Quebec is opening up the doors for immigration as well for those who speak French. If you don't speak French and you really want to go to Montreal, you want to study there, you want to work there, remember that there's another program that is not ARIMA. It's called PAC or PEQ. PEQ is two categories. One is based on your work experience. So if you come to Quebec and you have B2 in French and two of the brackets, just comprehension, and then you work in Quebec for 2 years, 24 months, you can apply for immigration under the PAC program. If you're going to go to Quebec and study, depends on the level of your education. For example, if you go and study a 2-year diploma, they call it 1,800 hours in Quebec, and you graduate and you work for a year and a half, which is 18 months with your upper intermediate French, you'll be able to apply for immigration there. Now, notice that they only need upper intermediate. They don't never require you to have advanced language proficiency in French because you worked or you studied in Quebec, and that proves to them that you're able to integrate in their local society. Okay, I'm not going to get into the details of how to come to Canada as a business person or as an investor. I'm just going to give you the highlights because this is a presentation on its own. And of course, if you want to have this conversation, we can definitely do another presentation about it. The concept is simple. The government cares more about the jobs you're going to be creating with your investment rather than the actual investment itself. So they call it a job creation model. I'm going to invest a sum of money. I'm not going to give it to a third party, so there is no risk. The money's in my pocket. I'll bring my money with me. I establish my own business. I hire people, and through these jobs I create, I will be able to qualify for immigration and my permanent residency because I helped the country in creating jobs. The concept, obviously, every province, every location has different amounts. The concept is you need to invest around 150,000 to around 500,000 Canadian dollars in your own business, depends on the location, and your net worth, how much money you and your family have, it needs to be around 600,000 to 800,000. Now, what's really cool about this is, let's say your mom and your dad, they want to make this investment and you're under the age of 22. Well, you could be included in the same application as them, you and your brothers and your sisters, right? Or if you are in your 40s or your 50s and you want to skip the whole process of coming in to do education, you work with CI to do language courses, and then you want to make a small investment, you can also do that as well. So it's a neat way to do things differently than just a normal procedure. There's another thing called owner-operator LMIA. Again, you're sponsoring yourself as an investor. And then there's something called the Startup Visa program. This is for those who have the next Facebook idea. Listen, I have this amazing idea. I want somebody to invest in my project, an angel investor or a venture capital, or you go to a business incubator and they assist you in establishing your small business. Again, very neat way of doing things, different than the skilled professional. It goes under the business immigration category. Spousal sponsorship, and you'll be surprised how many people apply under the spousal category. We never call it the marriage category because Canada represents different kinds of relationships that are approved under spousal sponsorship. So what is spousal sponsorship? So spousal sponsorship is you have a genuine relationship with a Canadian permanent resident or a Canadian citizen. You don't have to prove any language proficiency, any education, or any work experience, because your eligibility is based on that relationship. Now, what's really cool about Canada is the definition of relationship that falls under spousal sponsorship. So Canada approves or accepts legal marriages, accepts common law partners, and something called conjugal partners. So the definition of, obviously, legally marriage is you have that piece of paper that says, I've been legally married. Brazil has the common law certificate, so you can get that common law partner certificate. But let's assume you never got that certificate. Let's say you have been physically living together for 12 months, or you come to Canada, you meet somebody, and you move in together, and you've been physically living together for 12 months. That's what common law is. And many people end up doing that. They come to Canada, they meet people, they build relationships, and the next thing you know is, without even getting married, they are able to apply under the spousal sponsorship program. The only tip, or the only thing I want you to remember about spousal sponsorship is your partner, based on their status, if that person is a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, they have different rights when it comes to sponsorship. So if your partner is a Canadian citizen, no matter where this person is, inside or outside Canada, they can sponsor you. Processing time is around 12 months. If that person is a permanent resident, that person has to be in Canada. They cannot sponsor you from outside. So if you have a partner who's a Canadian permanent resident in Brazil, that person must move to Canada in order for the sponsorship to take place. And if you do go through this process inside Canada, application takes 12 months, you will get something called an OWP, an open spousal work permit, for you after just 3 months of applying, for you to be able to stay legally in Canada and work for, let's say, 9 months or 1 year until your final spousal sponsorship is approved. Cool? Now, when it comes to mom and dad, or it comes to your children or family sponsorship, Canada is one of the countries that really, really cares about family reunification. So you don't have to come to Canada and live here for 10, 15 years just for you to be able to get your mom and dad. Technically, if you want to sponsor your parents, if you want to become a permanent resident and bring mom and dad, you can do so within just 1 year. How does it work? Well, you qualify as a sponsor. Obviously, you're over the age of 18. You're a permanent resident in Canada. So you come to Canada, study, work, or you're a permanent resident right away. You file taxes for 1 year. Within 1 year, you automatically become eligible for something called super visa. Super visa is not permanent residency, but it's a step before permanent residency. So you come to Canada as a permanent resident. A year later, you file an application for a super visa. Mom and dad, they come. They can stay with you for 2 years. Meanwhile, you continue working in Canada for 2 extra years. So you file taxes for 3 years, and then you'll be able to sponsor your parents under the parents and grandparents category. Of course, if you do have children and they're under the age of 22, they will be included in the same application for permanent residency that you have. And if you got married to somebody later on and that person has children, you could potentially sponsor the children as long as they're under the age of 22. So it's a really nice way to bring in the entire family when it comes to reuniting here after you become a permanent resident. You don't have to be a Canadian citizen or wait until you become a permanent to become a citizen for you to be able to sponsor your family. Okay. Now, those of you who are thinking about potentially becoming Canadian citizens or getting the citizenship from Canada, there are 2 different requirements. There's one requirement for citizenship obligation. We don't say 3 years, we say 1,095 days. If you come to Canada and you stay here within 5 years, you just live here for 1,095 days, you'll be eligible for your Canadian citizenship from the day you become a permanent resident. If you come as a student or as a worker, you can count 1 year of that towards your citizenship, and then 2 years of permanent residency, and you're good to go. So think about it. Within 3 years of coming to Canada, you can potentially become a citizen. That's one of the fastest citizenship programs out there compared to, let's say, the US and other countries. If you're not interested in citizenship and you just want to continue maintaining your permanent residency, the first is 5 years. You get a PR card for 5 years. You continue renewing it every single 5 years, as long as you live. Again, we don't say 2 years, we say 730 days, because it's not continuous. You go and come back as you please. And as long as you collect 730 days from every 5-year duration, you continue your renewing your permanent residency in Canada. You're not obligated to stay in Canada for 3 years without leaving. You come to Canada, you see me and Jan, and you're like, you know what? I miss my family. I'm going to go home for 2 years. So you sit here for 6 months, you go home for 2 years, and you come back and you continue your 730 days. Off you go, renew your PR status. Canada likes you. Okay? I'm not going to get to the details of this. Some of you, your parents immigrated to Canada in the past. They never stayed here. They went home, or you came, you immigrated, you went home, your PR card expired. There is a process for us to be able to potentially renew your PR card, getting you a travel document for permanent residence, going to the immigration appeal division, and going through certain procedures to maybe be able to get your PR status back, or you can just voluntarily renounce it and you start a brand new application. So what do I do next? You're going to say, well, thank you, Basil. Thank you, Jan. This has been extremely confusing. I have a lot of information to think about. Where do I start? Do I visit? Do I study? Do I start my classes now? Should I come to Canada? Should I just forget it? Should I go to New Zealand instead? I heard Australia is nice. Maybe I'll go to Dubai. You have no idea where you should start from unless you've done your own research. What we can do for you, and pretty much our advice to those of you, and I'm telling you this, not just because we do this as a living, is because our own clients, thousands of them have gone through this process, which is you need to have a professional who will guide you through your plan and build this pyramid for you to know what the right steps are going to be. Don't jump the gun. Don't say, all right, you know what? I'm going to go and study. You know what? I'm going to go and work. You know what? I'm going to go and don't. Unless you know what you're doing. You've done your own research. That's amazing. Good for you. Send us your resume. We're hired. But if you don't, what do? Well, you need to get something called not a consultation. Never pay somebody money to sit there and give you this information that I gave you right now, because it's general. You need to have a customized evaluation and customized assessment based on your own circumstances. Because like I said, every person is different. So when you work with somebody like us, we'll be able to walk you through the different options, the restrictions, the homework you have to do in order for you to become eligible for certain scenarios. And we give you a report, around 15 to 20 pages of, we call it the what if scenarios. What if I do this? What if this happens? What if that happens? And we present to you all these different options. It doesn't matter for us. It's based on your own personal circumstances and the commitment you want to make towards your immigration plan. And you said, yep, I know exactly what I'm going to do. It makes sense. This is what I want. And if there are any language components, if there are any education components, if there are any travel components, this is where CI comes in. We're not an agency, they are. We do immigration and visas, and CI knows how to make you travel, how to make you study, how to make you learn English and French, how to start your online classes back home, how to come to Canada to do all these things. So you make your decisions about what the components are that you need to purchase, or to be able to know how much of it you need and when you should start it from us. And then CI continues that for the next 2 to 3 years until you're ready, until you come, or whatever the plan is. In terms of cost, in terms of how this works, we work in a very straightforward process. We call it the honor system. We can spend hours talking to you and consulting you, and then you're going to go and do your own thing. For us, we say there's no problem. You don't have to make a full commitment to what happens in the future and hiring our services for permanent residency. We say, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sit with you for an hour and a half, right? We're going to consult you, give you the report and the assessment and all that fun stuff. We're going to charge you 250 Canadian dollars. You make your plan, you continue your journey, and every single process you want to do after for permanent residency, we give you your $250 back. Think about it as like a deposit for you to be able to say, listen, I respect your time. Thank you for all the effort that you've done. Thank you for consulting me. Now I'm good. Everything else I'm going to do by myself. I'm smart, I'll figure it out on my own, but you help me in the first step. I will save thousands of dollars that I did not need to spend. And trust me, we've seen this many times. One of my own employees came to Canada, and after a year and a half, we were just doing her assessment. She's like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And I said, okay, well, if you could have consulted us before, you don't have to do this. So that's it. Look, you won't like us, work with us. You don't like us, work with somebody else. It doesn't matter. The point that I'm trying to tell you is pay a professional to do your consultation. You want to work with us, it's very easy. You go to our website, you go to the top right corner, you click on schedule consultation, you go down, you pick the immigration consultation and the evaluation package. You see Ayrton's picture, you click on his picture. He's Brazilian like you, he speaks the language in both Portuguese and English. He'll be able to go back and forth between that. Of course, there's more consultants, but if you want somebody to speak Portuguese, you can pick Ayrton. There's other people as well. There's Maria. So this is my advice to you when it comes to starting. Don't make any decisions. Get consulted first. Go through this procedure. We give you the entire report. We explain to you what you need to do next. CI continues the journey, fills in the gaps, and then we have all these different things set up for the next 2 to 3 years. Questions?
Basil, I think that's the moment that I do a little bit like a quick wrap up, and then I start asking questions. Yeah, and you take your water, no problem at all. So I'm going to speak Portuguese right now, and then I come back to you, okay? Bom, pessoal, muita informação, tá? Como vocês viram, né? Assim, para que vocês, quem que está acompanhando desde o começo, você viu como é possível imigrar para o Canadá, uma série de caminhos possíveis, onde a língua, o inglês, o francês, o estudo, os diplomas, a parte de educação, a parte de trabalho, a parte de investimento, a parte de família, a parte de abrir o seu próprio negócio, o francês especificamente alavancando vendas, alavancando pontuação. Então, nós temos uma série de alternativas para que vocês possam emigrar, né? A tentativa, o objetivo desse webinar é justamente mostrar quão ricas são as suas chances de fazer isso, tá? Para o final, mas não menos importante, eu vou começar a ler as perguntas aqui também, obviamente, para a gente começar a fazer o Q&A de vocês. É extremamente importante, por mais que o Bassel tenha passado para vocês todas essas alternativas, né? É importante que você tenha uma visão individual, né? Essa informação, ele até brincou, né? Assim, se alguém está cobrando para dar essa informação para vocês, não faz muito sentido, porque essas são informações gerais, né? Você encontra em sites do governo e tudo mais. A grande questão é entender você individualmente, a sua família individualmente, e fazer essa trajetória e esse planejamento, obviamente, desenhar as trajetórias possíveis para você, e aí que entra o consultor de imigração para te dar um caminho ou caminhos mais viáveis, tá? De qualquer forma, eu vou começar a ler as perguntas aqui que vocês mandaram, e aí a gente vai começar respondendo. Se vocês quiserem continuar a mandar perguntas aqui, dando tempo, a gente continua, a gente vai responder para vocês. Now, Basil, I'm going to ask you some questions that the audience just sent it. Just let me go to the beginning. Let's see. The first question is there an age limit for immigrating to Canada? I mean, for applying?
Right. So remember, when it comes to age, the maximum number of points you're going to get is between the age range of 19 to 29. It does not mean that after the age of 29, you're done. You can no longer apply to immigration. So let's say if you're in your mid-30s or even mid-40s, and you lose all the points under the factor of age. Remember, you have language, education, and work experience. I'm not telling you it's impossible. I'm telling you have to do more in the language and education and work factors. So for an example, if you're 32 years old, you only lost the 25 points. And if you just do higher education in Canada, that's enough. If you're in your 40s, you'd have to study maybe for 2 years, then work for 2 years and have higher language requirements in order for you to gain enough points. So the older you are, you just need to do more. It's not impossible. And Jan was there. We were sitting, the guy was in his 80s or his 90s. I'll never forget it. It was a seminar we did back in the day before COVID. And he sat there and he came to Canada to study English and improve his language proficiency and then to explore his options in the future. Do not let age discourage you. There are solutions. There are ways. There's provincial nominee program. Think about it this way. 600 points from PMP. If you get the 600 points for PMP, it doesn't matter how many points you lost under age. You'll be okay. Okay? So work with us, work with CI, understand what you need to do to compensate for the points you lose under age, and off you go. And always remember, if you're, let's say you're married, or if you have a spouse, your spouse is younger than you, you become your spouse is the principal applicant. You're the accompanying person coming with him or her, and then they apply for immigration, and then they go through you. If you're in your 60s, you invest in your children. Your kids will apply for permanent residency. They go to college, they get their permanent residency, and they sponsor you. Different ways to do it.
Great. I'm going to translate that there very quickly for him, okay? Márcio, eu não sei se você captou, mas em síntese, não existe limite de idade mandatoriamente, né? O que existe, na verdade, são estratégias que você vai usar à medida que você perde pontuações, né? Até os 30 anos, até os 29 anos, você tem a pontuação máxima para imigrar, em termos de idade, né? A partir disso, você começa a perder até os 45, que é são as últimas pontuações. Então, basicamente, o que o Bassel mencionou é que, perdendo pontos, né, como na parte de idade, você tem que procurar outras estratégias para compensar essa perda de pontos, né? E aí sim trabalhar, de repente, na parte de trabalho, na estratégia de quem que vai aplicar e depois fazer o patrocínio, né, o sponsorship para você, dependendo da sua estrutura. Por isso que é importante essa análise para que entenda em que momento você está, se é a sua questão pessoal, e ver qual era a melhor estratégia. Se você é casado, qual que é o né, quem dos cônjuges vai aplicar e tudo mais. Então, existem alternativas. Então, respondendo a tua pergunta, não existe necessariamente um limite de idade, mas sim estratégias diferentes. Ok, let's move on. A gente tem uma outra pergunta aqui do Carlos Eduardo Moreira. Bassel, there's another question here. And Carlos is asking, when you apply with a spouse and you have 450 plus points, but your spouse scores less than that, like 30 hundreds, are you considered separately? So you consider both spouses separately, or the invitation should be together or apart? This is a question of how do they deal with different scores between spouses?
Sure. Think about it this way. It's a family application. Every time you apply for immigration, or if you apply for a study permit and your work permit, you include yourself, your spouse, and all your unmarried children under the age of 22. So if you're going to be applying with your spouse, you're not submitting two separate applications. You're submitting one family application. What you need to do between you and your spouse, you need to select one of the two of you to become something called the principal applicant. The principal applicant is the person who has to do all the work, or the majority of the work. The spouse will add a few more points, maximum of 50 extra points to the equation. But you don't have to speak advanced English and your spouse needs to have advanced English. You don't need to school and your spouse needs to go to school. One of you does all the work and the other person supports. So if you speak advanced English, if you're the one who's going to be doing the immigration procedures, your spouse does not have to do the same. But your spouse will be included in the same application. So one of the first decisions you have to make is who's going to do all this? Who's the one who's going to study? Who's the one who's going to work? Who's the person who's going to be improving their language, right? If you don't know yet, then you need to just make a plan of what if I come and study English and French, and then my spouse will go to college, or both of us are going to do something. But one person only is required, the family is going to be included.
Cool. Carlos, bom, só para fechar, o que foi dito é basicamente, quando você vai aplicar com, né, um casal, né, dois cônjuges ou duas pessoas, né, em common law, tanto faz, o que conta é o conjunto, né? Então, quando você vai aplicar em família ou em casal, o que é determinado é qual é o aplicante principal, né? Quem é aquele que tem mais pontos. Então, essa análise, inclusive um dos serviços que a Incubate faz dentro daquela taxa que ele mencionou no final, é justamente fazer essa análise. Quem que é o aplicante principal e quem que é o cônjuge, e o cônjuge, normalmente, ele só adiciona ao aplicante principal até 50 pontos mais. Então, essa análise de quem é o melhor qualificado, quem vai ter mais pontos, é feita, e o cônjuge entra juntos e os filhos de menor idade entram juntos. Então, é um núcleo de aplicação onde se soma, mas não é uma somatória de duplo, como no teu caso, não se soma 450 mais 300, mas pega-se o principal, então, por exemplo, de 450 mais, e o outro adere junto com os filhos também, tá? Also, there is another question here from Laura, and she's asking, I'm going to speak in Portuguese and then in English, okay? Ela pergunta se há preferências por diplomas de determinadas áreas na imigração. She's asking if there is a specific preference or have some specific careers more weight or more power, more score in terms of immigration.
So another very good question. So before 2015, my answer to this is going to be yes, because immigration was based on your profession. Canada every year will announce certain professions that they want to invite and they want them to immigrate to Canada. In 2015, when Express Entry was implemented, your occupation doesn't matter. As long as it's a professional occupation, so the level of your job, if it's in your level 0, A, and B. So if you're doing marketing, sales, if you're an engineer, if you're doing operations, project manager, regardless of what you're a nurse, doctor, doesn't matter. As long as you're in the required level 0, A, and B, then everybody in the system will be invited and everybody is going to be treated equally based on the total number of your points. So if you have a doctor with 470 points, if you have an engineer with 470, a salesperson and a marketing executive, they will all be invited based on the total scores that they have, regardless of their professions. Now, the only thing I can give you an advice on is this is not related to immigration, but after you immigrate, there is something called regulated professions. You need to have a license to practice. So a dentist, a dental hygienist, an engineer, certain professions, you need to have a license in order for you to practice. So here, you just need to make a decision about, okay, well, if I come to Canada to immigrate or to study, right, what is my profession going to be after I'm done? Do I need to have a license or not? And you need to prepare yourself for that. Because as a doctor, for an example, you might have to come to Canada and spend 3 years to re-equalize your education and take a specific license to practice. Same thing with lawyers and all that. But what's also very exciting is there are different kind of licenses you can get in Canada, even if you can't practice. For example, if you're a lawyer from Brazil and you can't be a lawyer in Canada, you can study paralegal. You can become an immigration consultant and a legal assistant and be licensed within maybe 1 year or 2 years, and you will be able to enter the legal field and work for a law firm until you work on your master license to become a lawyer. So these are two separate things. Immigration doesn't matter. After immigration, you might want to be able to consider what happens in your licensing when it comes to your profession.
But also, there are some careers specifically that for the PNPs that might have an impact, right?
Right. So Jan brings in a very good point, which is the provincial nominee program. So remember, provincial nominee program are based on you obtaining a specific job offer based on the province you're going to go to. Now, if you're just a doctor, right, you might be selected in a specific province that are looking for doctors, but most of these programs are based on you getting a job offer in order for you to be nominated. So it's called an in-demand occupations list. It's a way to come to Canada if you'd like it, but the point that I'm trying to make is there's no difference between the different occupations, but if you want to go through the provincial nominee program instead of just a standard express entry, and you don't want to go through French, then yes, every province has a list of in-demand occupations which you obviously will be able to provide you with, and we will tell you what each province is looking for.
Ok, cool. Então, na verdade, o que o Bassel comentou é que, assim, você, na verdade, se a sua ocupação, a sua carreira está dentro dos NOCs, né, que são carreiras no sistema federal, onde você pode ser NOC 0A ou B, né, como está aí no chart, você vai ser tratado de acordo com as categorias dentro dessas subcategorias especificamente, e vão ter pontos unificados para essas carreiras especificamente. Então, não importa o nível, a carreira, mas se você tem a senioridade dessas carreiras, você vai ter essa pontuação dada para você. Tá? O que pode acontecer aí, sim, é que existem, como o Bassel falou na segunda parte, algumas províncias, elas têm algumas carreiras em demanda, algumas profissões em demanda, que elas acabam dando, vamos dizer, preferência para que você aplique e tenha uma job offer nessas carreiras, né? Então, são muitas as províncias, são muitas as carreiras diferentes, então, aí numa consulta com a Incubator, eles podem passar isso para vocês sem problema nenhum, mas sim, podem ter alguns streamings, algumas entradas são levadas especificamente para profissões baseadas em províncias, tá bom? Bom, seguindo em frente aqui em relação às perguntas, tem algumas que já foram respondidas aqui, então eu não vou passar por elas. Eu vi que a pergunta da Kylan já foi respondida. O do Ítalo também já foi já respondida também. Basta, there's another one here. Casais com filhos têm mais dificuldade? Jill is asking, couples with children, they do have more difficulty in getting immigration status? Or
No,
to get
not at
more
all.
support?
No, not at all. Like I said, you need to have one principal applicant, right? So whenever we do a calculation, right? I mean, let me just explain it to you guys so you understand this in very simple terms. If you're not married, if you don't have a spouse, you're by yourself. You can achieve maximum of 600 points by yourself. If you're married, if you have a spouse, the 600 gets divided to 550 points by yourself and 50 points from your spouse. That's it. So the maximum your spouse will be able to affect you if your spouse takes no language exams, your spouse has no education, nothing, the maximum points that your spouse will bring you down is just 50. Now, if your spouse has a bachelor's, your spouse is under the age of 35, your spouse speaks English or French as an intermediate level, not even advanced, you will get to these 50 points. So families, is it harder for them to immigrate together? Absolutely not. Most of the people that come to Canada, they're either married or not married. It makes no difference as long as you have a plan. Both people cannot not have the requirements that we talked about here. So once you have the principal applicant, family doesn't really matter. It doesn't really affect you.
Ok. Bom, como é mencionado, você, na verdade, o casal com filhos é uma unidade, né, de aplicação, né, como sinteticamente falando. Então, filhos de idades underage, né, os de menores de idade, eles vão dentro do núcleo de aplicação e eles não são um obstáculo, eles não dão nem tiram pontos, eles simplesmente acompanham vocês nas aplicações. Aliás, só uma notícia, nota de rodapé, o Canadá é um dos países em que se mais atraem famílias, né? Porque quando você faz um college, por exemplo, público, e você vem no processo para se aplicar, para isso, normalmente as famílias, tanto o cônjuge que vai estudar como o cônjuge que não vem estudar, vem só para trabalhar, eles acabam fazendo no núcleo conjunto e todos vêm. E aí tem a saúde gratuita, tem uma série de benefícios que fazem muito sentido. Ok? Pastor, do you want to add something? I know.
I just wanted to show this is I mean, it's just too much information. We're going to get into the details. This is how the system calculates the points if you're married or if you're not married. Everything that you do, it's all based on the principal applicant. Look at this. There's only 10 points different in this factor. There's only 10 points here and 10 and 10 and 10. So it doesn't really affect you that much if you have a spouse or not. The percentage is very small in terms of effect.
Okay, cool. Let's move on here because we are short of time right now.
Sure.
But going forward with the questions here, I'm going to lead in Portuguese first. A Beatriz pergunta aqui se meu marido pedir Work Holiday Visa com o seu passaporte português, quando ele tiver, uma vez que ele tenha trabalho e alguns pagamentos, alguns paychecks, ela pode requerer o visto de trabalho aberto? Vou fazer essa pergunta para ele aqui. Bassel, there's a question, kind of tricky question, at least for me. If my husband requests a work holiday visa with his Portuguese passport, once he had a job and a minimum of some minimum amounts of paychecks already, could I request an open work permit?
Yes. So working holiday visa, thank you for doing your research. If you get a working holiday visa with the Portuguese passport, right? The spouse technically is not eligible for an open work permit right away. The person has to come to Canada, get a job offer, work, produce 3 pay stubs. So let's say 3 months in a professional occupation, knock 0 A and B. Then the spouse will be able to apply for an open work permit. If then that person gets another working holiday visa, the second year, or switches from working holiday to young professionals, technically, if the person is still working, you'll get another work permit. So the only disconnection that you'll have in the beginning is around 3 months. You can come as a visitor with your spouse until the 3 pay stubs are ready. Then you can apply for your open.
And will be the open work permits would be for the duration of 1 year or for the remainder?
It goes hand in hand. Whatever the date of the working holiday visa is going to expire, the open work permit is going to expire. Okay. Typically, maybe it's going to be for 9 months or 6 months, depends on when the application is going to be accepted.
Ok, cool. Então, respondendo aqui, Beatriz, na verdade, sim, você pode, né, a partir de 3 meses, né, desde que a ocupação do seu marido, né, do cônjuge seja dentro de NOC, né, 0 A ou B, né, o cônjuge pode pedir o seu Open Work Permit junto, mas ambos vão ter duração fixa. Então, o Work Holiday Visa normalmente tem 1 ano, pelo menos, a duração. Então, o Open Work Permit que seria concedido também terminaria no mesmo momento do que o Work Holiday Visa. Tá? Moving forward here, let me see. We answered this already. Bobby Ribeiro, she questions, language courses in Canada counts as a Canadian experience?
Good question. So, what we talked about is the definition of work experience outside Canada. The definition of Canadian experience, or CEC inside, is any work experience, again, minimum of 30 hours per week, and it's paid, but only if you have a valid work permit. Now, when you come to Canada and you're going to be studying a language, you're either going to be a visitor because you're studying less than 6 months, or if you're going to be studying more than 6 months a language, you're not going to be able to work. You don't have an authorization to work. So that work experience, obviously you can't work, so you can't get any experience from language, and you can't get any points, like any education points for language. But let's say you finish your language courses or you're going to go to college, the college points will apply. But remember, again, any work experience you get as a student will not qualify for immigration. So if your program has a co-op, or if you're working part-time while you're a student, again, that experience doesn't qualify you. Once you graduate, once you get the PGWP, that's when you start counting experience for the Canadian experience class. But if you have a spouse, if you're going to college and your spouse gets an open work permit, that experience counts. From the previous question, if somebody is going to get a working holiday visa, young professionals, any of these work permits, that experience counts. So studying a language and being a student, any work experience here doesn't count. Post-graduation work permit, open work permit, LMIA, exemption codes, these are the kind of work permits that will allow you to gain Canadian experience, and you can use that for immigration.
Okay, cool. Let me translate it. Na verdade, para que você tenha a Canadian Experience, na verdade, você precisa poder trabalhar. Então, o intercâmbio de língua, o fazer inglês aqui no Canadá, ou fazer francês aqui no Canadá, ele não permite que você tenha uma autorização de trabalho. Então, você não pode trabalhar enquanto você estuda línguas, né? A partir do momento que você tenha por exemplo, um college ou qualquer outra aplicação onde você tenha possibilidade de trabalhar depois do teu estudo no PGWP ou alguma outra possibilidade de trabalho aberto após você terminar, você vai ter uma Canadian Experience em questão de trabalho, né? Então, isso normalmente, para que as pessoas que tenham o Canadian Experience, normalmente eles acabam se matriculando num college público, por exemplo, porque eles vão ter um PGWP para fazer isso, ou muitas vezes também o Work Holiday Visa, que você acaba tendo 1 ano. O que é super importante que o Bassel mencionou é o seguinte: o co-op, ou o trabalho que você tem durante o período de estudo, né, como, por exemplo, o estágio remunerado, etc., para efeitos de imigração, ele não conta como Canadian Experience. Então, é importante que seja uma experiência profissional independente do estudo, depois do estudo, por exemplo. Aí sim, eles acabam contando para isso também. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Beatriz is asking Bassel, she's applying for a job within your company, okay? She's saying she's got so much knowledge. I think she's qualified to apply.
Hey,
so wait
how
for
bad incubate that CA? We're hiring.
Let's see more here. Okay, let's another question here from Luis.
Sure.
I'm going to read in Portuguese first. No programa de Ontário, podemos escolher a cidade, e nos programas provinciais, quanto tempo precisamos permanecer na província? Podemos nos mudar posteriormente? Right, Luis ask us, Bassel, the Ontario provincial program, are we able to choose the city? And in the provincial programs, I mean the provincial immigration programs, for how long we should stay in the province to be able to move it out as we pleased?
I'm not going to teach you how to cheat the system, but here's what I'm going to say. When you apply to the province of Ontario, the entire province is covered. So you've got Ottawa, you've got Toronto, you've got Mississauga, you've got Newmarket. It doesn't matter where you're in Ontario. You can apply in any of these locations, and then you'll be able to apply under the provincial nominee program in Ontario. Now, once you submit your application, if you're outside of Canada, if you still did not enter, and then you come to Canada as a permanent resident, you get your confirmation of permanent residence, and you do your landing as a permanent resident, okay? The next morning, technically you're a permanent resident, and you're protected by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, meaning you have the right to mobility, meaning if you want to go and live anywhere else in Canada, nothing by law makes you stay there. When do you really have to stay in the province is if you're going to come and study or you're going to come and work in the province on your temporary resident status, you stay in the province. But once you apply for immigration, get your permanent residency, you're a free bird. You can go anywhere you want. We've got many clients who say, listen, I come to Ontario, I stay, I tried, but you know what? I've got family in another province, or I want to move somewhere else. I get my PR status, I can go and live anywhere I want. No restrictions, no conditions. In the past, there used to be, but now there are no conditions when it comes to getting your permanent residency after you immigrate.
Cool. Bom, pessoal, essencialmente é o seguinte, nos programas provinciais, existe uma regra muito simples, né? Quando você consegue sua residência permanente, a partir do momento que você vira um residente permanente, você tem liberdade para ir mudar e viver onde você quiser no Canadá. É um documento federal e isso não te obriga a permanecer na província após você ter vamos dizer, a sua residência permanente. Enquanto você não tiver residência permanente e as regras da província requerem que você lá esteja, tenha o seu job offer, o que quer que seja, aí sim. Tá? Então, é importante ver que o documento de residência permanente é federal, portanto, você pode mudar no momento que você o tenha. Tá? Okay, let's move on here. There's an interesting question here, Basil. It's a very extensive question from Pedro. But the meaning of the questions, the core of the questions resides. Sure. Is there any scenarios that my spouse would lower my score if I do it alone or with a spouse? I mean, he's giving like an example. He made some calculations and he said he would have more points, a higher score if he does it alone than doing with the spouse. Is that possible?
Yeah, let me put it this way. Just make it very simple. If you're going to have dinner tonight, you're not going to sit at home and eat the plate by yourself and your spouse is going to watch. The same thing in immigration. You cannot not add your spouse to the application. If you're married or if you have a common law partner, you must declare that person. You don't have an option not to include your spouse in the application. And then after you immigrate, you add that person back. The only way you can not disclose your spouse is by getting a divorce. And then you're applying unmarried, and then in the future, whatever happens, happens. So if you're married, you're married. You must include your spouse in the application. But remember, the worst case scenario is the 50 points that you would lose if your spouse is not going to do anything at all, right? Your spouse, just by his or her age, you can get up to 13 to 25 points just by the age. And then there's education, and there is language proficiency. So if you're married, you must include your spouse. You cannot calculate the score without him or her. It has to be included.
Okay, but is there any chance for someone to have the score lowered by the spouse getting into?
Yeah. If your spouse is not going to learn English or French, you lose points. If your spouse is not going to equalize or get the ECA, if you remember, we talked about this, the Educational Credential Assessment, to equalize the diploma or university degree from Brazil, you lose points, right? So your spouse, the 50 points, if you look at what that translates to, language of the spouse, education of the spouse, and age of the spouse. Any of these three will add up to 50 points. If your spouse doesn't take English or French language exams, if your spouse doesn't equalize and get the ECA, well, age is age, you would lose these points.
Ok, cool. Bom, Pedro, o cenário é o seguinte, você não tem como não incluir a sua esposa se vocês são casados. Isso pode ser um problema para você não tem como omitir isso e entrar e conseguir sua residência e tudo mais. A única circunstância que você teria é se divorciar da sua esposa e depois, eventualmente, retornar com ela, o que é um cenário complexo para se dizer o mínimo, né? A grande questão aí é que se o cônjuge diminui a pontuação, porque a questão do inglês, a questão da língua, né, a questão da educação e idade, né, a questão é investir também na questão do cônjuge para ajudar, porque o cônjuge pode sim diminuir, mas ele também pode aumentar. Então a ideia é fazer com que o cônjuge alavanque a sua pontuação. Basil, you would like to add something?
That's the point that we were talking about. That's the maximum your spouse is going to be able to lower your score. So if there is no ECA and there is no language proficiency, you would lose 30 points.
Okay. Cool. Então, ele está mostrando aqui a possibilidade de crescer ou perder o ponto, né? Então, isso é importante que você leve em consideração. Por isso que o planejamento no processo de imigração é importante, para que você saiba lidar o que você tem que fazer. De repente, hoje você perde esses pontos, mas você pode reverter isso para somar pontos. Tá? Moving on here. Okay. There's a question here from Fabio. He's asking, what's the trend in terms of scores for the scores for invitation to apply? Is there a trend for increasing the points, lower? Do you know?
I mean, this is it. I mean, this is the entire year. It's been 470 to 475. It has not dropped under this. I'll be honest with you. Canada is becoming more competitive in terms of the people who are coming in here, because before there were too many options for immigration. There was the US, there's Australia, there's New Zealand, there's all these different places, right? But now what's happening, and even Ireland, now what's happening is Canada is becoming the #1 destination for immigration. So anybody who wanted to go to the US is coming to Canada. There are people in the US every single day telling us, I want to move to Canada. So the number of people who are applying is increasing. No matter how many invitations that the government is issuing, there's just so many people in the system. So I'll be honest with you. Do not expect the score to go under 470 anytime soon. It's going to be 470 to 475 for a few more months. We don't know what happens next year, but this has been the trend for an entire year. And last year, it was around only 5 to 6 points under when it comes to the average. And again, we do have statistics. We can share it with you, the median, the highest of the highest, the lowest, and all that. You will see that this is what you need to be preparing yourself in, 470 to 475.
Cool. Bom, na verdade, então, a pergunta é que a tendência tem sido essa de ficar em 470, 475 pontos por um bom tempo, e o Bassel, ele explica que pela demanda, né, pela quantidade de gente no sistema e pela demanda que o Canadá tem tido como destino de imigração, ele acha muito pouco provável que esse número venha a diminuir. Então, essa é a tendência que ele enxerga. Basil, there is another question in this same. Fabio also asks. It's going to be for the French speakers. There will remain disadvantages that you mentioned. You think it's to encourage more people who speaks French in Canada? You think it's going to be disadvantage for long?
Absolutely. Look, what's happening is Quebec at one point they became a lot more strict when it comes to immigration. Canada started realizing they're starting to lose people who speak French to other countries. So what happened is all these provinces and even the federal government is now giving bonus points for French on a provincial level and also on a federal and on a federal level. So the federal law doesn't change very frequent. So the 30 points, you're going to get them for a very, 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 very long time. I don't see this going away anywhere anytime soon. The provincial government of Ontario, and this here, the exemption for LMIA 616, that's a federal law. It's not provincial. So getting a work permit with your C16 code with B2 in French and the 30 points, that's going to stay no matter what happens. And then the provincial government, all that we continue to see is more provinces are opening new streams for English and French speakers. For example, Nova Scotia now has a similar program like Ontario, a little bit higher French, but it's the same concept. Now, the only thing that you can expect to happen is these scores, we can't control them. It's based on the province. But there is no way this score is going to be higher than the federal program. It is always going to be lower. The federal government will give the 470 and the provinces are always going to be around 30, 40, 50 points under. And this, if you notice, in the past 2 years has been running smooth and it's going. So no, I don't see this going anywhere.
In a nutshell, it's gonna last, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Bom, Fábio, como ele mencionou, ele acha que a percepção é que o estímulo, o apoio, vamos dizer, os benefícios para os francófonos seja constante e que isso se mantenha pelo tempo. O que pode variar, obviamente, são as questões da pontuação de franquia e tudo mais, mas ele enxerga isso continuando. Tá? Eu vou dar um pouquinho rapidinho aqui, porque nosso tempo está acabando, gente. Also, there is another question here from Diego. He asked, how to prove work experience for express entry? Because I'm a PhD in material science, but I'm always working like as fellowship in laboratory at the university, not a company or industry. How can I prove my experience?
Excellent question. So your fellowship is technically considered an internship. Internship, as long as it's paid, regardless of how much you're getting paid, even if it's minimum wage. So if your fellowship was a minimum of 30 hours, or maybe you did only part-time, 15 hours for a longer time, you technically work for the university. So the university or your professor will give you an employment reference letter. You have your taxes that you're paying. You have that book to the government to say, I am employed in these places. And this is how you will prove that you really got paid for this. So a job reference letter from your professor or from your university saying that you did your assistantship, to say you worked a minimum of certain number of hours per week and you did get paid. So it's not just an unpaid internship, and you can count that towards your immigration status. And by the way, if you ever want to continue your fellowship in Canada, there's a specific way to take that over and get a work permit for 2 years and come and do your fellowship here in Canada. Many people do that, which is a very nice way for you to be able to get Canadian experience and apply for immigration this way as well.
Bom, ele mencionou que, basicamente, o fellowship, ele funciona como se fosse um estágio, desde que você tenha sido remunerado e, pelo menos, você tenha um part-time ou um período razoável durante semanas de trabalho. Então, ele, formalmente, o fellowship, ele funciona como um estágio remunerado para a universidade. Então, a universidade seria seu empregador. Tá? Para que você prove isso, você precisa de uma carta, obviamente, da universidade descrevendo a tua carga horária, o trabalho que você fez e o período, para que isso seja contado como experiência profissional. E ele menciona também que o fellowship pode ser uma possibilidade, caso você ainda faça isso atualmente, você queira transferir o seu fellowship aqui, ou continuar seu fellowship aqui no Canadá. Existem possibilidades de você não apenas continuar aqui no fellowship também, mas você também tem possibilidade de até mais 2 anos trabalhando aqui, o que aumentaria o teu score aí para a sua imigração, sua residência permanente aqui. Tá? Okay, let's see if there are more questions here. Does European passports helps the process to acquire permanent residency?
Canada does not discriminate or treat people differently when it comes to immigration. Everybody's going to be the same. If you ever watched that, the inauguration speech of the Prime Minister said a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. So no matter where you're from when it comes to immigration procedures, you're going to be treated equally. The only difference is your location means a different embassy is going to be processing your application. So the processing time will differ. Your nationality might potentially affect you when it comes to visa, not immigration. So remember, when we were talking about your nationality or the procedures, there's something called temporary resident status. So if you're going to come as a visitor, as a student, as a worker, some nationalities don't even need a visa. Some they do it. Some have higher approval rate for study permits. Some are going to be eligible for a working holiday visa. So when it comes to temporary resident status, yes, your nationality could potentially become an advantage for you. Permanent residency and citizenship, everybody's the same.
Okay, perhaps if someone with a European passport, perhaps he could have potentially more opportunities to have like a work holiday visa so that he can get more Canadian experience, right? But
it opens doors for you. In order for you to gain the necessary points or to gain the necessary experience, then somebody else might not have that European passport.
Right, okay. Bom, basicamente o que ele diz é o seguinte: nacionalidade nenhuma você vai ter tratamento preferencial ou menor, ou você vai ser tratado de maneira diferente, porque na declaração do discurso de inauguração dos governos sempre dizem que não existe nenhum tipo de discriminação. Então, na parte de nacionalidade, você não vai ter nenhum benefício qualquer que seja para todos os efeitos. O que pode eventualmente acontecer é para alguns tipos de visto que você seja elegível, que de repente algum passaporte ou alguma nacionalidade te dê mais credenciais para uma visita temporária. Então tem algumas nacionalidades que vêm e têm a possibilidade de trabalhar com mais facilidade do que a brasileira e tudo mais. Mas para quando você, com todas as credenciais, você vem e aplica para a residência permanente, você é tratado como todas as nacionalidades são tratadas iguais. Tá? I think it's the last question here, Basil. Let's see.
I have more questions. I'm going to quiz everybody now.
Okay, I have a technician. Let's see. Let me try to translate. He's a nurse in Brazil, and the technical program that he finished is he just had a technical nursing course in Brazil, and he has 3 years of experience already. Would this favor to apply in any province and to work in the health sector as a caregiver or a health technician here in Canada?
Well, first of all, I salute you for being a nurse and being in a medical field nowadays. You are doing an amazing job. You are a better person than all of us. Second of all, there are certain provinces who support nurses and people in the healthcare industry. So for an example, Alberta has a specific immigration program for nurses. Your education, remember, you have to get something called an ECA, an Educational Credential Assessment, and you need to be very careful with it as well. Just because you think you have a technical diploma in Brazil, it doesn't mean it's going to be a technical diploma in Canada. There's potentially going to be an equalization to a bachelor's. We have seen people who took a 5-year bachelor's that it was equalized to a master's. So the level of education in Canada will be equalized based on the ECA, and that's done by an authorized organization in Canada. So with your education and potentially one of the provinces that supports your profession, potentially that could be an option. Or you might be able to come and continue your education in the same field here in Canada and then continue. Maybe you want to work in a nursing home, at a retirement home. You want to do something called caregiver program instead of becoming, a technician or something else. So you can potentially upgrade your education in Canada as well.
Cool. Bom, Vicente, o que ele mencionou é o seguinte: existem sim programas que aceitam, né, a parte de saúde, nursing, o caregiver, principalmente provinciais, para que te receba, né? A grande questão é que talvez o que aumente a tua possibilidade de tanto para a residência permanente, mas também a sua empregabilidade, é que principalmente o caregiver, ou assim, por exemplo, outros programas relativos a isso, você pode fazer como você tem um técnico no Brasil, fazer um college aqui, por exemplo, para incrementar a tua educação e aí alavancar ainda mais a tua possibilidade por questões de trabalho e de residência permanente. Então, existem alternativas e essa sua carreira é uma carreira interessantíssima que requer, obviamente, certificação, mas isso é possível com uma baixa carga de estudo aqui também, então faz muito sentido. E como ele falou, realmente você, nessa época de Covid também, né, é uma carreira absolutamente valorizada cada vez mais, né? E, enfim, faz todo o sentido possível. Bom, pessoal, acabamos nosso tempo, né? A gente já está aqui já quase 2 horas falando, realmente foi bem extenso, porque o assunto é bastante extenso, né? A gente, obviamente, deve ter tido mais, eu não vi se tem mais perguntas aqui, mas se vocês quiserem depois mandar essas perguntas para a gente, porque assim a gente responde tranquilamente. Eu acho que o Willy também está aqui já querendo falar com a gente de toda forma, mas o que eu só para fazer um fechamento rápido, Basil, I'm gonna just wrapping up like shortly. Our host is already here to close. Yeah, it's 2 hours already, right? I'm gonna make a closure here in Portuguese, and then you make your final thoughts as well, and then Willy will take over, okay? Então, pessoal, basicamente agradeço bastante a presença de vocês aqui, foi muito legal, perguntas muito interessantes, mas o que é importante vocês terem em mente é cada trajetória é muito pessoal, então seria muito importante vocês virem individualmente, né, aqui com a Incubate, fazer a sua análise especificamente qual que é o seu caminho, quem aplica, quais são os melhores cenários, e a gente pegar desde o primeiro começo, desde o começo vocês, e realmente fazer uma trajetória que seja eficiente em preço, rapidez e tudo mais. Então, sabendo o que você tem que fazer, o processo é mais simples, né? Mais uma vez agradeço. Basil, thank you very much for your lecture, let's say so, and thank you for your knowledge. We do know that obviously everybody has their own goals, their own profiles, so everyone requires a special and customized consultation and their pathways as well. But thank you again for your support and knowledge.
Very nice, guys. Really, really amazing content. Thank you, Vessel. Thank you, Ian. Pessoal, todo esse conteúdo, tudo isso que vocês acompanharam aí, vai ficar salvo aqui na nossa playlist da CI aqui dentro do canal do YouTube. Então, vocês conseguem acompanhar tudo isso. E lembrando que todas as nossas lojas estão prontas para te ajudar aí com a sua residência permanente no Canadá. Então, se você já está pronto, já está se planejando, depois dessa super palestra aí do Bessel, desse bate-papo com o Ian, é só você entrar no ci.com.br/WhatsApp, você vai encontrar a loja da CI mais perto de você e você pode continuar esse papo aí com o Ian. Então, a gente consegue agendar esse bate-papo, onde o Ian consegue aí tirar as suas dúvidas junto com o pessoal da Incubate e vocês juntos aí terem essa consultoria exclusiva, especial para você. Ian, Bessel, mais uma vez, obrigado. Thank you, Bessel.
Absolutely.
Acho que é isso, pessoal.
Absolutely. Enjoy your
Legal.
night. Take care.
Valeu, pessoal. Tchau, tchau.
Bye.
Tchau, boa noite. Obrigado pela presença. Tchau, tchau.